I love Monster Sanctuary. I just play it forever. Too bad it promotes Jainism. Monster Sanctuary promotes Jainism? Welcome back, Scrubs. This is Hidden Values, the show where I look at RPGs and JRPGs and I try to present the influences that's possibly embedded in these titles. I am your host, Noah Price. I am a Christian, young whippersnapper Christian scholar who loves playing JRPGs and RPGs, and I just want to present the potential hidden values that's in these games. Yeah, I don't know. I just believe it's very important for all Christians to know what we're consuming, and that includes video games. So let's dive into this episode. In last episode, I mentioned the struggle that video games can have when trying to be stuck in a genre and trying to find its own identity. In that game, it had to do with Souls games and trying to be its own kind of Souls game with its own identity without being completely compared to Dark Souls. I made a little reference to Pokemon. So today, we are going to be looking at a game that, in some regards, attempts to do this against Pokemon. Of course, I am talking about Monster Sanctuary. Monster Sanctuary is a Metroidvania-esque monster taming game. In a lot of ways already, this kind of does make this game stand out from Pokemon and give it its own identity. But I would say Pokemon tries to do this in certain ways, and this game just does a little few things that really actually makes it work. Just jump right into it. You can tell by the devs and publishers at Moe Ra and Team 17 really did a lot of good work at making this stand out from Pokemon. This shouldn't be too surprised with Team 17, who's known for their great games like Rogue Heroes, Neon Abyss, and probably most famous to many people, Overcooked. Now, these games aren't very similar to the genre-esque that we see in Monster Sanctuary, but I think they do a really good job at nailing what is good about a monster-catching game. But what even is the story of Monster Sanctuary? I'm glad you pointed that out because it's kind of important. In Pokemon, as many know, you're set out to go complete the Pokédex, but who really cares about that? You're really there to go do all the gym badges and become the Pokemon champion. Now, the story of Monster Sanctuary has some starting points that's very similar, but the rest is very different. Monster Sanctuary's story goes like this. As the youngest heir of an ancient bloodline of proud monster keepers, you step out into the world to follow in your ancestors' footsteps. You will gather a party of monsters to grow and train. Meanwhile, a series of unsettling events worries the experienced keepers of the Monster Sanctuary. This is the beginning of a journey to unravel the cause of a mystery that threatens the peace between humans and monsters. Whew, getting chills just thinking about that story. Now, as it first starts off, yes, it has some weird bloodline situations with this storyline. I kind of like it. A little bit weird. Makes me think of Fire Emblem Three Houses, but that's just me. Basically, you have to start off with picking your starter, or your familiar, which is what it's called in this time. This starts off with a separation from normal monsters to these familiars. There's 4 different kinds, and they're kind of, well, we'll get into it, their importance on this game. So, what are the four familiars? We got Leo the Lion, we got Dark Phoenix, we got Edgy Wolf Boy, and most importantly, we got Froggy. I obviously chose Froggy because, it is totally the superior monster of them all, obviously. Honestly, I thought about getting the Phoenix just because, it's the bird. I like Phoenix. It made me thought of Moltres. I love Moltres. Moltres is my favorite for bird legendaries because he's the best. But no, I decided to pick on Frog because it kind of looked the most derpy, and I kind of liked it for that thing. But it's just me. So this game has a bestiary. Well, really, it's called Monster General. But whenever RPGs have bestiaries, I love it. I love it so much. Especially when they go into depth of putting so much love into it. So at the Monster Journal, you have these beautiful, beautiful little art design of the monsters, which just gives so much more life to the creatures when you're limited with a pixel art design. Of course, you do see other stuff like stats and descriptions of it, which is massive, which is really helpful. But also, you get stats and other stuff. It's really neat, and you get to see and slowly get to fill out your monster journal if you want. But moving on back to the main story that we have, you start off picking your bloodline familiar that you want to do, and then after that, you're introduced to the 3 other dudes. Well, not really introduced; it just kind of presents it, and you're plopped into the journey, and you're pushed off by your own familiar who speaks, which is really odd. Wasn't expecting at all, especially coming from Pokemon. It was a little jarring, but kind of like it at the same time. I don't know. It's very weird. It seems like it's only the familiars can do it. Very odd, very weird. They're very special for reasons that aren't fully explained, which I kind of don't like, but it is explained later. We'll get into it. But you're ushered off into starting your journey as a keeper. So keepers are basically what's trainers in this game, and keepers are monster keepers. You keep monsters. That's kind of how it works. So you're ushered off into getting your first monster. Now, unlike Pokemon, who you have a mechanic, you have an item that you use to catch these Pokemon. You don't have that in this game. Yeah, you don't have that in this game. Basically, how you catch Pokemon and how to get into a Pokemon is through battling enemies. So you have to actually beat enemies in enough to where you actually have a possibility to get an item drop, which is an egg. And once you hatch that egg, then you have the monster. They do explain this, and it makes sense in the sense that when you hatch a monster, instead of trying to grab a monster in general, there's a difference in them becoming loyal to you. That's how they explain it, which I think works. Monster Sanctuary's setting does take place within a time where monsters and humans do coexist. And this is mostly the reasoning behind it, is that in general, monsters aren't that bad and are somewhat peaceful to humans, but monsters even coexist with humans even closer when they have this loyal bond from birth. So what really is your goal as a keeper, a monster keeper? Well, your goal as a monster keeper is to beat champions. At least that's kind of the only thing proposed at the moment. I don't know, it's kind of weird, like you're like this thing where it's like, yeah, we're keepers, we're like defenders, we're the defenders of the sanctuary. Yeah, it's great, but also like, from what? Because just in this game, just recently, supposedly, monster champions have been sprouting out. These champions are monsters who have gotten bigger and badder. How? Not really explained. But there's these champions that come around and they're bad news. So you got to have keepers come along and kind of take care of the issues that come up. And when the game starts up, this is when champions are kind of rising a lot more than normal. And obviously this is for no reason. This is obviously connected with the main story plot of the game and the main baddies. And so you get looped into solving these problems of champions while also figuring out why they're sprouting out more than normal. Now, without giving too much of the story away beyond what's necessary for diving into the possible influences, let's take a step back and let's go talk more about the gameplay mechanics. I specifically want to talk about some differences and similarities to Pokemon. And then after that, we'll dive into the influences possibly in this game. So Monster Sanctuary is a heavy strategic combo setup game. It's very similar to Pokemon where it's turn-based. You have two different, well, not just two, but two different Pokemon or monsters that you have to battle through picking moves and taking turns fighting and attacking. Now, I will say that in a lot of ways, this combat style and setup is much more technical, more in depth than what Pokemon will be. Pokemon is a little bit more simple in a way that's like perfect, while this one goes into a heavy side of setting up for combos. I mean, a big difference starting off that is the fact that during a battle, there's 3 monsters out at the same time, which allows for the battles to be more combo-based for you to play off each other's Pokemon, or keep saying Pokemon. Each other's monsters picking or fighting moves off each other. And you'll see this a lot with even just the idea of doing passive moves, or not even just passive moves, but also healing, supporting by doing, like, you could set up a shield. Doing stuff like that will actually put up combos and put up a percentage where when you attack and deal damage, it'll actually emphasize that damage much more. There is also a type system in this where different typings is good against other ones, and in the description of each Pokemon, why do I keep saying Pokemon? Each monster has a little description down below in its side where it says what it's weak to, what it resists against, and also what it uses against it. And this is not just with a type element as in Pokemon, but in Monster Sanctuary, the weaknesses and resistance can also be with just the type of damage you deal. Just like in Pokemon, how it has a split where it has physical damage and also special damage like magic or whatnot. In Monster Sanctuary, they have it set up to where physical damage and or magic damage can be the weakness of itself, not even just talking about elements. So elements doesn't even matter. It's just about doing special magic will do more damage, or it'll be more resistant. Now with all these going together, it really does fit up in a way to where you're not focused so much on just doing damage as sometimes you can be in Pokemon, but instead you're focusing on what can I do of certain amount of attacks to build my combo. No, why do I care about building my combo? What if I just do damage and kill it? As long as I kill it, shouldn't that be enough? Wrong! Monster Sanctuary has a reward system built into the game. Now, this is based off of a 5-star ranking, and based on that 5-star ranking, it determines on what items is dropped. Now, combos isn't the only thing that affects the outcome of the reward system, but like, it's the biggest thing. On top of this, if you do kind of take the combo system for granted, the game will mollywop you later on in the game. This game gets really hard. A big problem that Pokemon game gets a lot is that it gets really easy, especially later on in the game. Monster Sanctuary is much different. It's quite the opposite in this frame of mind. As you get to later fights, it gets extremely hard, and the game really pushes you to the test and be like, hey, do you actually know how to do this system? Which makes it very rewarding when you actually do know how to make usage of this system. Now, if all you had was just simple attacks and simple shields and healing to really boost up your combos in battles, that might not make the battles as engaging, or even throughout the game, it might get a little bit lackluster. Especially since in this game, you don't get constant different moves as you level up like you do in Pokemon. The main emphasis that you get in this game that's different from Pokemon is instead of main focus on getting new moves, you can either upgrade your moves or get more passive traits. Now, these passive traits are basically the equivalent of abilities that Pokemon games have. Normally in Pokemon, you only have one ability, and that's it. This game, you can get multiple passive traits, which could really stack up and really be influential later on in the game. Now, all this happens not just by random of just leveling up and it's like, oh, hey, you acquired this. But this is actually through a skill tree. One of the funnest aspects of Monster Sanctuary is its skill tree. It has a vast skill tree for every monster, and a lot of them are very different, especially since, unlike in Pokemon where majority of the time you only have one typing or one element to it, almost every monster, well no, every monster has a split element typing. This allows for no matter what monster you use in your party, you almost always have a diverse team. Now, talking about the team in Monster Sanctuary is set up similar to Pokemon to where even though you have 3 monsters out at the same time, you are limited to only having 6 monsters in your team. I didn't find this too limiting at all. It was a little bit weird, especially since as you go throughout the game, with the Metroidvania aspect of the game of exploring and especially trying to unlock puzzles through your monster's abilities, It's very weird because, well, let's just get into it. Monster Sanctuary's emphasis on puzzles and exploration is done really well through the aspect of using your monster to explore and solve problems. Pokemon does this through HMs or hidden machines and being able to use Surf, Rock Smash, or Strength to get through different obstacles. But this always feels very limited and very structured to where it's like, yeah, my Poke monsters are helping me through the journey, but like it doesn't really feel like. It very much just feels like traditional RPG of like, oh, okay, I finally got the thing so I can progress. Monster Sanctuary does this in a really, really cool way of setting up to where every monster has several different abilities already in itself to where you can use that certain monster to unlock an area. My favorite thing was that, like, with different situations or different puzzles, they actually sometimes set up ways of giving the same way to solve the problem in two different ways, allowing you to be more creative and not worry of being limited to what monster you use to solve a problem. On top of this, Monster Sanctuary just does a great job at setting up a great world to explore. I haven't even mentioned this yet, and this is blaring in front of the faces of everybody probably, is this looks like Pokemon if it was mixed in with Terraria. This does a great job with sticking with a simple pixel art design while allowing you to explore in a vertical sense. But I constantly found myself just exploring through this world. I thought it was kind of like important to it. It really sets it up in a way to explore and try to find different items you could find, different equipment, and different just NPCs. Now the NPCs in this game actually have a lot of fun side quests. They're not too complicated or hard, but I found myself finding it really worthwhile to go and complete the side quest. And it felt like if I didn't, I'd be kind of missing out on part of the game. This is an area that I wish Pokemon just did more. I wish Pokemon did a little bit more on its side quests. But here we are. Now the monsters themselves do kind of evolve just like Pokemon does. Except for this is only at a specific spot and it's only to one more stage compared to Pokemon where a lot of times it's to like 1 to 2 to 3. This, it doesn't do so much. A evolution of a monster in this game is not as much emphasized as it is in Pokemon. In Monster Sanctuary, you basically get a whole different monster if you evolve it. Once you evolve it, all your skills you had is changed. So, and that's really what brings out the identity of each monster. On top of that, like a lot of times to evolve a certain monster, you need a certain item, and it's not clear of what that item goes to. In a sense, it does feel like a little bit of a puzzle to solve of figuring out what goes to what monster to evolve it, but at the same time, it just ultimately didn't feel worthwhile to me. Another aspect that Monster Sanctuary has that's similar to Pokemon but is different is shinies. Now in Monster Sanctuary, it's not called shinies, it's called shifting. Now this actually doesn't come in until midway through the game with a certain plot point, but this does something kind of interesting. Shifting is something you can do to your monster, or you can find later on in the wild these monsters that are shifted, whether to the light side or the dark side, and they actually have an impact on the monster itself. Now these monsters were light or dark, the only thing that impacts it once you switch is, one, you get a cool color scheme to it, which are different, but also you get an extra passive trait. Now these passive traits are sometimes not too much of a crazy change, but it's enough to where I found it really awesome to do. And it also is just a simple way to like make your team stand out from all the monsters you fight throughout the whole world. Again, I think it's a great difference from Pokemon. Pokemon, when you have a shiny, it's like, oh cool, it looks different. That's it. Sometimes it's still worse than other Pokemon, but like in this, it actually has a difference to it, which I think it makes more sense. Now let's move on a little bit more from just the gameplay side of things to more of the story aspects of the game. Specifically, I want to talk about, well, kind of one, but it feels like two specific aspects that happens within this game's story. As you make your way through this game's story, you find out that the main bad guys that are kind of causing these champions to rise up are alchemists. Now this game has a whole setting of where you find out through stone slabs that there used to be a war that happened a while ago with the old world and the sanctuary. Basically, there was a split that happened that caused for the monster sanctuary to split and to become its own identity, its own world. And within that, there was a ban towards alchemy. Now, as an alchemist, not be able to do alchemy, kind of problem. And so throughout this game, you find a little push and pull of these alchemists rising up and trying to take control over their own fate. See, the alchemist, to them, Monster Sanctuary itself represents the idea of a prison. The Monster Sanctuary's only purpose in itself is preservation, which kind of just traps itself in their eyes. And I mean, you could see that a lot with the Monster Keepers, to where the whole point of keeping them around is to take care of champion monsters that rise up and cause problems. What we really see from these alchemists is the struggle of having control. Now, humans have this problem where when you have a lack of control, or what we see a lot of times is power, so like in a job situation, if you don't have a lot of authority or power, we can very much feel insignificant and even devalued. Now, these alchemists very much felt this when they're restricted from doing the thing they like to do, of being alchemists. I believe it was very interesting to get to see some of these alchemists struggle with the situation of not having this control of their own fate and feeling trapped. Now, we see this later on with the Keepers, and it makes sense within the idea of someone who fully believes in preservation. They do kind of like, hey, you can do alchemy. It's cool. It's just don't do bad things. And we see this, and that kind of really does fit in line with the Monster Keepers' just whole identity of preservation, of peace among all. Now, it was very interesting to, like, not only from the Keepers themselves, but even from the familiar. We get from our protagonist's familiar even mention this to some of the alchemists, that no matter who you are, we want peace among all. Now, it even uses this line of whether from the sanctuary or the old world, whether monster or keeper. And it's like supposed to be this very beautiful thing and coexisting and all that. It's all good, and I understand it. It's a peace among all. It's a great concept. Like, I mean, trust me, in this day and age, everybody wants peace within the world. I mean, that's always going to be a thing. But within this frame of mind, this is very much limited with just the idea of preservation. Just in order to take care of everybody, keep everybody safe, the safest thing to do is to have peace among everybody, obviously. But when you do that, you kind of lose what you stand for. When standing for something, sometimes that means you have to be in opposition to something else. I mean, this is what we see with the alchemists. They stood for something else. They stood for having control of their own fate, to having freedom in that sense, and that meant opposition. Now, for the Keepers who want just peace among all, I am to the extreme of this thought process. It could have been even to the point of allowing these Keepers to do anything they wanted if it meant peace among all. Now, obviously, this didn't work because the alchemists went so far to doing harm and damage, which kind of disrupted that peace. The easy way we see this related in this world today, and it's just the problem of peace among all, is, as I mentioned, you kind of lose the value of what you stood for. What does this look like for Christians specifically? I would see this on stickers of cars of this idea of coexist. I mean, on screen you can see it now. It's a representative of a bunch of different religions and beliefs and values, and it proclaims the message of peace among all. While on paper, peace among all seems to fit in with the Christian mindset of loving everybody, it does fall flat. Coexist and what that represents is not in line with Christian values. The thought process and belief of coexist falls in line with the mindset of, well, just the saying that every path leads to the same destination. This is a thought process that no matter what religion you believe, no matter what values you or how you live your life, we're all going to end up in the same place. And this isn't just saying with death, we're not all going to die in the end. That's not what it's saying. It's saying beyond death, what's that next thing? Oh, well, don't worry what you believe in. because it's all going to lead to the same thing. This very much is in a mindset of, well, I don't want to cause conflict to the people to saying what I believe is different than you. What I'm saying is what I will go on to is not what you will. The Christian belief is different. Christian belief is there's only one path, and that's through Jesus Christ. It's very clear in the Bible. That's what it is. Aspects like this of peace among all, even though it's very positive, in a lot of sense could be beneficial, it's not always necessarily a good thing. All right, now beyond just analyzing certain story points within this game, I want to talk about a specific possible influence in this game. I will clarify that I don't know for sure if this is clearly what the game was influenced by, but this is something that, I don't know, it seems a little bit more than coincidence. Some of the aspects that I'm gonna present. Let's talk about it. In the beginning of this episode, I mentioned Jainism. Jainism? This is what we're talking about. You see how these familiars, how they're different elements? Yeah, that's kind of important. So, as we find out throughout this game, these familiars, these specific four, were actually used within the creation of this monster sanctuary. Now, each one of these familiars represents a different core element. Yes, what we're connecting this to, and what I think is of a huge influence in this game, is the idea of elementals. When looking at what elemental is a mythic being that is described in occult and actually also alchemical works from around the time of the European Renaissance. And we particularly found this elaborated in the 16th century of the works of Paracelsus. Paracelsus? Paracelsus. According to Paracelsus, him and his subsequent followers believed that there was 4 core categories of elements, which were considered gnomes, undines, sylphs, and salamanders, which these 4 actually correspond with the Empedoclean elements of antiquity, which is what we commonly see as earth, water, wind, and fire. And these are the same terms we see commonly associated with alchemical elements. Now, I'm not saying that all of the belief of elemental is what's influencing this game, but it's very clear that within this game, the familiars that we see are archetypes of these core typings, or these core elements, especially with the inclusion of wind element. See, this is very different from Pokemon, who only has the 3 core of grass, water, and fire. In this game, we actually get what's called earth instead of grass. We get fire, we get water, and we get the inclusion of wind, or as in the other elements, air. Now, on top of this, we actually see in Monster Sanctuary, it's talked about how the creation of the Monster Sanctuary as a whole, which is the world we explore, is set up in different biomes based on these elements. I know I haven't talked about Jainism yet. Let's talk about it now. So Jainism is similar to elemental. It's kind of a split off, and the thing is, I don't think this game is just clear-cut elemental influence. I think it's influenced with this concept of elemental and Jainism, and one more. So Jainism is similar to elemental, where it has the same concept of the creation of the cosmology, which has to do with the elemental foundation. Jainism talks about how it has to do with these specific beings, though. That these elements are within these beings, even though in this it's more, there's 5 instead of the normal 4. See, what we see here, so Jainism's 5s are earth, water, grass, fire, and wind. So we get a separation from earth and grass. But the big difference is that these are endowed with souls. See, elementals, it's soulless. It's just an element. It's just matter. While in this, it actually has a connection much more to it, which falls in lines with monsters, especially in the monsters we see here. See, in Monster Sanctuary, the monsters we see is just from all different mainline monsters. So we got like Manticore, which is more Persian stuff, and we got like blobs. We got tree dudes. Like, they all have souls. that's a clear thing. Especially later on in the game, we specifically clearly see a soul to these creatures, even if it's just specifically just with the familiars. It's not clear if it's just with the familiars that have souls, but I'm kind of more just assuming that there's a possibility as a whole. So we see these different aspects of these values or these perspectives on the world kind of fall in line with this game's mindset. Now it's just one thing if you're just taking a game and you want to have certain typings. And it makes sense to just fall in line with Pokemon, and since Pokemon has had such great success with it of having different typings based on the elements, it's not hard to do the same here. But one thing that really stood out to me is the connection with alchemy. The main bad guys in this game of Monster Sanctuary is alchemists. And this thought process did originate with alchemist itself. So those two plays of concepts was kind of interesting. Now there's one more aspect to these two that really connects it in a way that's kind of weird. It really makes me think that there's a little bit more to this than just a possible assumption. So similar to the elementals and similar to Jainism, there's another spiritual movement called Rosicrucians, which was again from Europe. Now these specifically claimed about seeing elemental spirits. Now here's the key thing that I think really connects this game with this thought process. So now these beings with this belief known as elementals were said to be longer lived than normal man, but they cease to exist upon death. There's a weird situation there to where like they could live longer, but once they died, they're dead. Kind of weird. Now the caveat was that if a elemental had wed a mortal, then it would become immortal. And supposedly this also worked in reverse, where if a mortal wed with a elemental, they themselves becomes immortal. Now, not to spoil the game, but this game does have some twists, and it does kind of have this aspect in it. So basically, with this concept of wedding being in this game, and on top of the other things I've shared about this belief of just the concept, at the overall broad concept of elementals, it's just, they kind of fit in this game in a weird sense. Now again, I don't know if this is just all assumptions, but just the idea that these concepts are a little bit influenced in the idea of using elementals in general is something I wanted to present to you guys. But those are some of the key influences that I found within this game. Are you going to play this game? Let me know down in the comments if you are. Me as a Christian young lad, boy, man, I enjoyed the game a lot. I really did. But if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to play this, I hope this video will help you keep in mind some of the possible influences that could be in this game. If you like the video, please subscribe. This is kind of the content I hope to bring more of, is showing more influences to you guys that could be pointed out, but could be assumptions, but maybe not. Let's see. I don't know. If you like the video, subscribe, please.